tonight to the St. Genevieve Museum Learning Center. We appreciate you coming out for our speaker series. And how many of you are members now? Quite a few of you. Well, if you're not a member, you can apply tonight's admission price to a membership. Now, what do you get for your membership? Well, you get unlimited visits to our museum here, and I hope you've had a chance to look around a little bit, and maybe even after the presentation you can stroll around for just a bit. But you also get admission to all of our speaker series. We try and have a couple a month, and we've had some pretty good ones. And coming up, we've got our one in May is going to be, if you're interested in flying, we're going to have a presentation on a little bit on the St. Genevieve flying strip that's been here for over 50 years. And also Greg Reminger is going to give a presentation on gyroplanes. So if you don't know what a gyroplane is, you'll find out all about it on the 15th of May. So that'll be our next speaker presentation coming up. Now, we rely solely on admissions to keep our doors open, as well as donations and sponsorships. And tonight's sponsorship is by Roland Machinery, and we certainly thank them for their generous sponsorship tonight. And how many of you have stories about Brickey's? That's probably why you're here tonight. And we hope you share some of those with us tonight. So, if you can share them. I remember shortly after I moved down here, I took a drive, and I heard about Brickey's Pass, so I drove down there and by myself, and my husband said, "You went there by yourself?" Maybe you shouldn't have done that. But anyway, we're going to hear all about it. So our guests tonight are Adam Eatherton. He was born and raised in Eureka, Missouri, graduate of mining engineering from the University of Missouri-Rolla. Worked in several different mines in a number of states, including California and Texas and Minnesota. He's been with APAC Brickey's for a little over 2 years. And his cohort here, Jennifer Huck, she was born and raised right here in St. Genevieve, bachelor's in business from Central Methodist, and has worked with APAC Brickey's going on 17 years. So you've heard a bunch of the stories.
And I love every one of them.
Very good. So without further ado, take it away.
Well, just I guess a quick open up. We're part of APAC Brickey's. It's currently owned by an operating company under CRH, APAC Mississippi, based in Jackson, Mississippi. And the company's primary purpose is to put the black sticky stuff on the roads down south. So that's really what we're doing, and is making the big rocks and the little rocks and shipping that down the river. And Brickey's has a really interesting history, and we're happy to be here tonight to share that. So I guess without further ado, we'll start off, and I'll let Jen take her away.
Okay. Can we stay over here?
I'll be right here. Alright, so my name's Jenny, and I'm going to basically talk about from when John Compton Brickey came to Brickey's, came to Bloomsdale, it wasn't Brickey's quite then, along with when he finally got rid of it and the other people that it went to, and then all the way up into when Albert Menifee bought it and still currently has it. And then Adam will get to talk about it from 96 on. So, it all started in 1837 when John Compton Brickey was only 21, and he came over here from Potosi with the dream of starting a trading place for people to be able to trade on the river. So he started out by buying 83 acres from Towson Lakier, and Henry Beckett, and then about 3 weeks later bought another 40 acres from the Missouri government. So then he finally had his place, and he called it, of course, Brickey's Landing, because why wouldn't you? So he ended up marrying Mary Carpenter in 1840, and she was actually from St. Genevieve, and they had 2 children, Eliza and Franklin, and Mary ended up dying in the Great Flood of 1844, but true to times, he married her sister, Emily, in 1846, and they had 14 children. So a fun little side history that Bob Mueller told me, well, emailed me, was in 1858, there was a steamer called the Sultan. It was heading up to St. Louis. And another resident of Brickey's at the time, known as Francis Moreau, woke up like 3 or 4 in the morning because there was a light coming in his window and he wasn't sure what it was. So he went to look and the boat had caught fire. And so when he went outside, he could hear people yelling for help. So he ran down, got in his skiff, and started trying to find people by the light of the boat alone because they didn't have anything else, and locating them by their voices. He ended up hauling out numerous people, and as he was hauling people out, he found out that Franklin Brickey, who was only 16, had also gotten a skiff and was hauling people out as well. There were 64 people total on the boat, 52 were crew and 12 were passengers, and at least 20 of them ended up passing away, either not being found or died on shore. And they drifted as far down as St. John before they gave up looking for them. So kind of sad, but kind of cool too, because we had a local hero at Brickey's. But back to Brickey's. In 1858, oh, I lied. In 1869, the flour mill was built, and there's rumors it was built with contracted by slave labor. Whether it's true or not, to each their own, but there were parts of the basement that the walls were 3 feet thick, and it was more than likely just because it was right on the river and it needed to be sturdy to hold up to the Mississippi. I mean, everybody knows how strong that river is. But the mill was ran by an engine and it sat on a slab of Ozora marble. And yes, Ozora is close, but at that time, it really wasn't close. So the fact that they drug this huge slab of marble there is pretty cool. However, well, I took it back a little bit. How do I go back?
The arrow.
The arrow. Got it. Okay. So John built his home, and in picture 1, that's the view that he had from his porch. And 2, because he had 16 children, is the size of the house. And then whenever he built the mill, which was the building in the back here on 3, it was the first building. And then there was the store as well that was in front, but that came a little bit later. So right after the Civil War, unfortunately, John came on hard times and he had to sell part of the land. And then the rest actually got foreclosed on. So John and the family had to leave. But 9 years later, Franklin, gotta love the hero, came back and he bought all of his daddy's land back. And that was in 1897. But by then, John was already living in Festus. He was already settled down, he was happy, and he never actually came back down to Brickey's Landing. So in 1902, Franklin sold the land to Justin Potter. So Justin Potter had it for a very, very short period of time before he ended up selling 7,000 acres to Judge E.J. Roomba out of St. Louis. And he was a very well-known and very well-respected judge in St. Louis. So he bought 7,000 acres, and as soon as he bought it, he sold the right-of-way to the railroad. And so they put in the railroad track, and as soon as that was in, it was the first track and train that went from St. John to St. Louis, and once again, Brickey's was prosperous. So Judge decided he was going to build his home, and he built it up on the bluffs. And that was his home there, not the judge, but he built it up on the bluffs where he could overlook the river, and he had what was called a 6-mile view. And you could literally stand up there and you could look for 6 miles up and down the river. It was gorgeous. He also got to overlook the entire town, so it was like his little domain. Yeah. But he mainly stayed in St. Louis because he was a judge and you kind of have to stay close for that. But he had 2 daughters that grew up and lived at Brickey's, Bertha and Sophia, and they remained at Brickey's until they passed away. Neither one of them married, and they were well known in the community for just their good deeds and always helping out and being there for people, which is really awesome. Bertha passed away in like the early 40s, and Sophia didn't pass away until 65. So then the house, and I'm skipping ahead just a lot actually, but I'll come back. The house was the last remaining structure at Brickey's until 2006, whenever we had to take it down because of safety concerns. we had literally blasted all the way up to the house where you could look out the windows and down the bluff. So at that point, we deemed it probably not safe to keep around. So, back to when Brickey's was prosperous. Like I said, whenever it was prosperous, there was many changes. When Judge Rumbaugh bought the town, he actually changed John Brickey's home into a boarding house. It was right there on the river. It was perfect. And also, just let me point out, the house you can see up on the very top of the hill, that was the judge's house. And how I said he could look over the river, which is over this side, and all over the town on that side. He had a heck of a view. But the boarding house was ran by a Mrs. Theodora Karen, and then later on by a John Roth. And then about the same time, there was a store, a post office, and a quarry that all got ran by Mr. Karen. And then even a lime kiln was brought in, and it was owned by the Cliffdale Lime Company. And they had 5 kilns, 4 of which were coal and 1 was wood, and they actually harvested the wood off the hillside to run that kiln. But the the company went bankrupt in 1913, and so it shut down, obviously. But while everybody was still prosperous, a train depot was put in right at the foot of Brickey's Hill, and it was ran by Mr. Welton Pinkley. So obviously, if you have all these lovely businesses, you have to have workers to work in them. So in Brickey's Hollow, there was what was called a string town, and there was a saloon, a dance hall, a barber shop, and it was also where all of the houses where the workers lived. At the very end of it, there was a school, and it opened in 1908. Mrs. Armella Peterson, Juddy Ditch, and Louis Drury all taught there, and at times there was up to 40 kids at this school. And I did not find out until this evening when I talked to my mother-in-law. Armella Peterson taught here in town, and she rode the train from town to Brickey's to teach. I was like, that's kind of cool. In the early 1900s, the flour mill got reopened, and it was operated by Mr. Duerge, and they made and sold St. Genevieve grand white flour. And what was cool about that was before, you brought your grain to the landing, and then you had to trade it for the flour that was already brought back, and I mean, it worked. You know, don't get me wrong, it worked. But with the mill there, you could bring your grain and automatically have it turn to flour, and then if you had any excess that you didn't need, you could actually sell it and make money for any other goods that you needed. But times being as they are, or as they were, better trucks and cars were made for hauling supplies, and soon Brickey's became deserted because they didn't need the landing anymore to ship anything. The train didn't pick up any passengers, and soon the depot closed in the 30s, and it was just a flag stop. And in 1951, the flag stop even stopped, so it was a complete pass-through. The lime kiln and the quarry both closed in the 30s, and then there was a marble quarry that was ran by Mr. Weiler, and that soon closed as well. But a fun fact about the marble quarry is it still stands today. You can't technically go see it because it's private property, but it is still there, no machinery, but it is really cool to be able to go in and look and see. You can tell where they drilled out the pieces, and the stone that came from there actually built the Zell Church. Wow. So, in 1960, then Albert Menifee finally purchased the land, and he was married to, well, he's passed, so yeah. He was married to Valerie Potter, and I've always been curious if that's the same Potter family that Justin Potter was in 1902, because that would just be a cool little crossover if it was. But Albert bought it, he started the quarry back up in 1960, and it stopped in about 1970 or so. And then the only remaining residents were Henry and Mamie Aubuchon. And Albert kept them on as caretakers because he didn't live around the area, and he needed someone to kind of watch it to make sure that nobody was vandalizing, tearing up, destroying, whatever. And Mamie was actually also employed by the Corps of Engineers. She would go down and get the river readings before everything was all electronic and everything. In 1986, the fire destroyed, a fire came through, it was a really strong wind, and it destroyed the mill of the store. And the mill, the store, and the judge's house were the last 3 remaining buildings, because a lot of the houses that the workers lived in, whenever they all left, they actually tore their houses down and took the material with them, because it was cheaper to take the material than it was to buy new or try to make new. But Mamie Aubuchon was the last remaining one, and she passed away some years ago now. But to anybody that knew her, she was a pistol in the truest sense of the word. I got to meet her 2 times, and I've heard other stories where one gentleman ran across her at the river, and he asked what she was doing, or she asked him what he was doing. He said, well, it's like I was just looking around, I hadn't been here in a while, and she had a pistol on her hip. And he said, what's that for? And she said, well, it's to kill varmints, the 2- and the 4-legged kind. So she was not a woman to be crossed. But that is what I had for the history, and I would love to hear anybody else's history that has some as well about it. And I will turn it over to Adam to continue on from there.
Well, I just want to say this is Mamie's daughter.
Oh, are you really? Oh, your mama was a peach. Yes.
And grandson, great-grandson.
So wait,
That's my daughter.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I never knew who the girl was.
And never mind.
I think though that it's Valerie Potter Menifee, and so on all the records, it transferred later to Justin Potter. I'm pretty sure purchased it from Brumbauer, not.
Yeah.
That's why.
Really?
It shows up.
Like in about the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at it.
Father-in-law, right?
Correct.
Yes, yes. Because I remember meeting him and
I think that's where she was going with that.
I was home at that because I thought she couldn't remember these people. And it was in the 1800s. Oh,
No.
and can I correct another thing?
History that's
The judge never lived in that house.
No, he didn't. He built it, but his
He
2
built
daughters
it for
did.
his 3 daughters. There were 3 of them.
Yes, but I
Irma
heard-
also.
Yes, I never did hear anything about the 3rd daughter though.
With Irma, and then Irma ended up marrying. She's the only one that married, and she moved to Boston. So there were 3, and I knew Irma, and I knew Sophie.
So maybe
But
that's where
Bertha
we find out
died
the other one.
when I was young.
The couple.
And those 2 women were pistols. They were very much independent, sophisticated, free-thinking women.
They sounded like it.
And they were very, very political and, really involved in politics. None of them ever worked because they had enough money and never had to.
Okay, wait though. Didn't Irma write the cookbook?
That is the sister-in-law.
Oh,
So
sister-in-law. So there are 2
Irma's
Irmas?
brother married Irma, I'm trying to think of her name.
Oh,
And so that's joy.
Oh.
Yes, and I have the original copy.
And you've got the original copy?
Yes.
Whoa.
Anyway. I'm sorry, I get all excited.
It is, and I'll preface it as it's going to be hard act to follow, because I just find it boring at the So I'm going to cover pretty much the latter half, and then kind of get a little bit of a rundown of kind of what we do today. So definitely not as exciting. So
I'm sorry.
no, wonderful. So like I mentioned before, the Menifee family bought it in the 60s and still own the property. We ended up operating under a lease under the property even today. It was 1996 when Pat and Tully started interest in opening up a quarry here at Brickey's for river quarry. Got into a joint venture with, at the time, APAC Tennessee, which APAC was a company really big in the Memphis area, up through Missouri, and believe more in the southern states. And it was opened up as a river quarry. So really the main purposes here was they were looking to make a big riprap for the river jobs, and then your construction stones. It wasn't necessarily geared towards asphalt production, although that was something that APAC Tennessee had the interest in because they, at the time, and still do, have a lot of asphalt plants and concrete plants down in the Memphis area. I believe it was 2008 with Oldcastle, or was it 6? In 2006, Oldcastle, which is CRH, at the time in the United States, they were still going under just the Oldcastle name, bought APAC to whole. And APAC as a company across the U.S. kind of got carved up into smaller operating companies. So at the time, we were still under the APAC Tennessee company up until the early, the mid-2000s, when we were then transferred over to the Kansas side of APAC, to where we've now recently, in the last 5 years, been transferred back up under Tennessee, which now rolls up under Mississippi. So it's kind of it's a corporate story that's really not, incredibly interesting. That kind of explains why we're, APAC, Mississippi, Tennessee, and we do roll up under CRH. So a lot of things have changed since the beginning. We were originally put in as a river quarry, and with Pat and Tully was a river contractor. So they were really interested in the big riprap jobs down the Mississippi River. Pat and Tully got out of it in the early 2000s and turned it over completely to APAC, which now, CRH, and we are primarily interested in the asphalt size rocks, because that's really where the company base is. So we're making a lot of material sending down the river. If anybody's ever driving, and I take a lot of pride in this because it's kind of cool, it's the first time I've got to do this. If you're ever driving down I-55 in Durant County, Mississippi, Brickey's Rock is in that asphalt. So, but yeah, so this is a more recent overview of the property. We lease about 800 acres, and currently about 364 acres is the pit area itself. It's a very interesting quarry, kind of a complicated conglomerate of different limestone formations that makes it extremely challenging. So we have anywhere from the Fern Glen, and we'll skip a little bit ahead to the next slide, but Fern Glen, Burlington formations, Kimswick, which is one you hear a lot about in this area, and then the lowest we're mining right now is the Platte. But this overview here is we got our main pit. Our office will be up here. Our plant area is right up here in the old valley, and I shouldn't have touched that. And then the barge loadout is over that bluff there. And then just to kind of give you a reference, the White House we've been talking about used to sit on top of that bluff that's no longer there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, here's a little bit closer picture. So yeah, the house would have been somewhere in this area here. And then another cool thing that you can kind of see, kind of for a reference, the marble line that we referenced is on the other side of this bluff here. So it's outside of our lease. I believe it's still on Menifee property, but up along the northern end. There's really no good way to get into it other than walking the railroad track, and that's why there's really no safe way to get to it most of the time. But here's an idea of our different geological formations. And I like this one, it's a little bit easier to see. So from the top, we call it the Burlington Formation, but it's really a kind of a combination of the Fern Glen limestone formation and the Burlington Formation. It's kind of a yellowish to whitish color, a little bit chert bound. It's really probably what most of us saw growing up in most of the smaller quarries you put on your driveways. Underneath that is about 30 foot of the Macoga shale. It's kind of a purplish, grayish material, and because it's a shale, it's a waste for us. We have to end up hauling that out and building, big dumps outside of our mining area. Underneath that is the Kimswick. It's about 80-foot formation. That is our high calcium layer. It is a pinkish reddish rock and about 97% calcium. So a lot of the markets in the past for us for that has been scrubber stone. Chara operates a grinding facility on our property that feeds scrubber stone to Ameren for the coal-fired power plant. I can't talk. We've also supplied companies down in Louisiana for the same purposes. It's also, in certain states, Kinswick will work for asphalt rock, meets the state's requirements for that rock. Missouri is one of those states. And so now is Mississippi. That's something that's new for us, which is great. Because one thing unique about us is, we are a river quarry, so all our materials are going down to various different states, and believe it or not, every state's DOT has different requirements and different types of rocks they're looking for. So our various ledges won't always work in every state. So it's kind of a balancing act that we're having to do to make sure that we safely and effectively open this mine up. Underneath the Kinswick layer is another a waste layer. It's the Decorah. It's kind of a shale limestone mixed formation. There's really no good way of getting the good limestone out of that formation outside the shale, so it does end up being a waste layer. And then under that, currently what we have developed is what we'll call the upper platen and lower platen. The lower platen, or the platen formation itself is a pretty good formation quality-wise for asphalt rock, used a lot in this area. It works very well down south as well. Currently it's about 120 foot combined with the two benches that we have developed, and with core drilling we've done, we have another 115 to 150 foot below us of platen formation. And then what we don't have here too is there's about another 150 foot of dolomite before you hit the St. Peter sandstone. So there's a lot of life left in this area and in this mine. About 100 years of reserves just in what we have opened up here towards the river, if we are able to effectively get to all the layers that we discussed.
How far below the river level is the bottom of the pit?
Currently we are at 242 and the river is 384. So I'm terrible doing math quickly in my head. 100 feet?
144.
Thank you. I was close. So yes, and actually that's a good question because with our current distance from the river, and we don't deal with any infiltration, noticeable infiltration from the river. I would say that we are a decently dry quarry. Even from our core holes, we didn't notice any back pressure from water. What we do get is some infiltration from our tailings area here that makes its way through the formation and runoff. But for the most part, it's been pretty manageable. And of course, our plan is to get to depth and turn towards the river because at some point, as we anticipate, there may be issues as we get closer to the river of having water challenges. And then as, with all mining operations, the process really, really starts in the pit, developing, the plans on how we open it up effectively, what benches we have to mine, and then the kind of fun part and what kind of got me into mining in the start is the blasting. So I put a couple blast videos in here to kind of show. This one unfortunately doesn't have any sound, but this is our part of our upper platen formation here. This was an old switchback that we're taking out, and that is a 70-foot high wall right there from the floor to the top, and that's going to be about 40,000 tons in this blast. And then this one is our lower plat. It's about a 50-foot bench, and what we're doing is we're looking at combining the two benches. So instead of having an upper platen and a lower platen, we're going to have a 120-foot face. That way we can better control the quality and the blending of the formations, because they do vary slightly in their qualities, and it'll actually help us open up the pit better as well. So this one is also probably roughly about 40,000 tons, and this one has sound. So I like to put those in there because I see it so often, I kind of take it for granted, but it's kind of fun to share. All right, so after the material is blasted, we have to haul it. So just kind of some tidbits of our haul road and what we're looking for from a mine planning and a management standpoint for any mining operation, and that's going to be our haul roads. So right now our total distance from where we're mucking to where we're dumping in our hopper is about 3,000 feet. So we know it's under a mile, but we are, and I didn't put this in here, we're coming up about 200 feet. So it's about 242 in the bottom, and it's like almost 450 or so where the dump hopper, and that'll be on the next slide, or where we're dumping. And we always try to go for about 10% grade, but we don't always get there. Sometimes it's up to 14%. You want to maintain good, you don't want too shallow ramps because they take up too much space, but you really, if you can avoid it, you don't want anything more than 10% because it really slows your trucks down. And then right now we're running 3 70-ton haul trucks fed by 1 loader. And I apologize, I didn't put any neat pictures of those in here. But they do about a turn every 12 minutes, and we're about 600 tons an hour currently. So this is the dump hopper, so they come all the way down from that bottom, they come up that haul road, they come up, and they turn around, they back up, and they dump the big rocks into this hopper, and then we have that's the start of the process. So we've got a feeder before that, and a jaw crusher after. And then, bear with me, I'm going to do my hand animation that I like to do for jaw crushers here. But it's kind of a cool setup. This was, again, originally meant for a river quarry. So they got a cool setup for how to make riprap. So you got a grizzly feeder before, then you got a jaw, and you got a grizzly feeder after. So what a grizzly feeder is basically it's a pan feeder, and you got grizzly bars on the end. So you got fingers at a distance apart, and it vibrates, and it allows the material to come through, and the fines will come below. Right? So you really only want to put rock that you're wanting to crush through the jaw crusher. You want things smaller than what the jaw crusher is crushing to bypass. Otherwise, you're just wasting energy. But how this is set up is we have another grizzly feeder below the jaw. So everything that even bypasses the jaw and goes through the jaw will hit the second pan feeder, and then we're able to get all the fines out. Anything minus, I think it's 6 inches, and then all the big rock that's bigger than that ends up going out a big belt out the front and makes a really clean, beautiful riprap material. And then how a jaw crusher works is basically you have a stationary steel plate, and it's like 48 by 60, and then you have a movable plate, and then one just moves like this, and then the rocks come down in, and then that motion there not only helps pull the rocks down in, but forces them with compression, crushing the smaller rocks to where they'll pass that opening in the bottom. And then depending on when we're sizing our riprap, we can change the distance that stationary and that movable jaw die is. So that's why there's such a huge swing between our primary crusher doing either 500 tons if we're making really small rock, or 1,000 tons if we're making the larger riprap like they put on the side of the rivers. And it feeds the secondary surge pile, which has about 20,000 tons in it that will feed the rest of the plant. And the rest of the plant has 2 more crushers and a series of screens, and that's where we're making our asphalt-sized rocks. And that is primarily, these days, they're looking for 1/2 inch and smaller. So we make what we'll call a 67, so basically like a 1 inch to a 1/2 inch rock, and then we'll make a 1/2 inch to, I think it's about a 1/4 inch, and then a 1/4 inch and smaller goes through another screw that gets washed out, and that's, some people would call it a manufactured sand, others would call it 11. It just kind of depends on what state you're in as well. And those are the type of products that we'll send downriver. And believe it or not, it's almost frustrating on our end. We go to all that effort to crush it, all that effort to size all that stuff into different sizes. And what do? They mix it all back together and mix it with the black sticky stuff, the oil, and then put it out in the roast. And then what's really neat about a river quarry in our operation is that we're loading the barges right on the river. So this is a cool picture we were able to get with the drone. We're actually taking our 70-ton haul trucks. We have what we call our ramp barge there, and the trucks back up on here, and they dump into the empty barges. There's a winch system that the tugboat will bring it up, and they'll tie one on the head and one on the stern. And actually they're spotting this barge, and what they'll do is they'll get enough into the barge to where it's down far enough to get up under the ramp. They'll run it all the way upriver so that you're not fighting the current, and they'll just start dumping loads on this thing and letting it go down river until it's full. And then basically you're measuring your draft, how far it's in the water. That's how we tell how much tons are in each barge. On average, every barge is about, when we have full drafts, is 2,000 tons. So that's a lot of material. We, with the same size fleet that we're feeding the jaw crusher with, we have another loader and another grouping of 3 trucks. We move about 1,000 tons an hour. So on a good day, we're shipping about 10,000 tons. So we move a lot of material fast.
How many trucks do you drop off in there?
It varies, but somewhere around 30.
How many
I
trucks do
think
you
he meant
want?
into the river.
Oh! We try not to dump in the river.
I mean,
So far, none that I know of.
have you ever, I mean, surely you probably had trucks that literally goes over the edge.
Not that I know of.
There's a stopping point that will
Yeah.
stop the tires from going over it. It's about half the size of the tire, so it has to really climb to be able to go over it.
Do you have to,
Not to go to a different quarry at all, but I have heard Tower Rock has the same setup, similar setup that we do. And I have heard of possibly a relation of mine that tried going swimming one night. But in 17 years that I've been there, it has not happened yet. So, fingers crossed that it doesn't.
It's happened in another place, because I rode a truck off one. Not into a barn.
Do you have to adjust the, when the river's down, do you have to adjust the weight down?
Yes, so that this barge here has two cables hooked to winches on the shore on concrete pedestals. And then this is just a man-made ramp of ours where this ramp just sits on the edge. So as the river comes up and the river goes down, we can basically lift this up, dig some of this out if we have to bring it in, or push it out to bring it out. And that'll vary. Since I've been here, I haven't seen extremely high water. I think I've seen high 20s. Flood stage is 32 is when it hits the railroad track, yeah. And but I've seen a lot of -3s, and that's where you're really pushing out in the river, and we can only go so far because you have to stay out of channel.
The question was more about the loading weight. When the river's been so low, do you have to adjust the weight of the barge?
Yes, the Corps will put draft restrictions on. They'll tell us what if they limit us. I've seen it as low as 8 foot. A normal draft's going to be somewhere around 11, 10 and a half, 11 feet. The last couple of years, more often than not, we've seen 9 for short stints. 8's been the worst.
How do they offload those?
I've never seen them offload. I've seen the rig in Memphis, and the way they did it was they have a similar barge with a ramp, and then they have a platform here for an excavator to sit on with a clamshell. And then they'll pull the loaded one up to it, and the clamshell will go down, grab material, and then the truck will back up, and then they'll dump it in there. A lot slower than what we're able to do.
Are those your barges or special barges?
They're mostly all leased. I don't believe we own any barges anymore. And then sometimes, we'll have customers that bring their own barges for us to load. Any other questions? I think that was my mind feeling.
I do have a question then on that, those shots where you're showing the layers. What's the geological age of those? Do you know? Do they match some of the animals?
I'm terrible at geology. I'm going to be honest. I made it through enough to get by in geology.
Nobody was going to answer.
I know there's a really cool map in the other room. It actually says Brickey's on the map. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said what they were.
How many people are employed?
We have 26 right now.
Really?
Yeah.
26, and we're moving that kind of material?
Yes. Yep. And we're running one production shift and then one maintenance shift in the evenings.
Got a question for Jeff here. You said that it used to be like 7,000 acres at Ridgeway?
Yes, when Judge Roomba bought it, it was 7,000 acres that he purchased. Now, I don't know how many acres Albert Menifee purchased, because he owns, like when you come in Brickey's, like from like the water tower and all that, Albert Menifee owns all of that as well. So Albert owns a crazy amount of property, not only around Missouri and that, but also down around Perryville, Sykeston, and even down into Arkansas.
Are you counting those acres then too?
No. No.
7,000
Just right there at the Brickey's.
Close to 11 square miles.
Yes.
That's a lot of real estate.
Yeah, whenever she said that the girls never had to work, that, because they never had to work. Daddy had a lot of money.
So how far north did that property line run? Is it all the way up to Festus or is it?
No. Wholesome is not on the property. It's, so so Albert Menifee stops before it gets to Wholesome. I don't know if anyone owns it between Wholesome and Albert or not.
Cave City, same. Cave City, same.
Okay, yeah.
But it's close to the next, I can't remember what it's called, the next collar.
Yeah, it's
It's
more.
closer to that.
So I just would say that, yeah, it's Morrison Holler there, and it goes down, and I don't know if it crosses the Establishment Creek, because maps and surveys are a little different, but essentially, if you go down into the Establishment Creek bottom, it hits the creek. I don't know if it crosses the creek, but it hits the creek where a big bluff is before you get down there. But I will add, and I don't want to do this, but since it was brought up, the marble quarry is cool, but don't go. You'll meet the sheriff if you end up there. So
Yes.
Just,
Yeah, they do, I can't say they patrol it,
I
by
do.
chance, but,
I
yeah, exactly. It's not, yeah.
It's, there's cameras and there's, yeah, so if somebody, goes in there, they get.
Yeah, and there's been rare occurrences. I kind of shake my head because we have, I think there's 4 signs that say stop at the office and sign in and all that, and I actually can't count the number of times that I've had to get on the radio through the years and say there's a white car, a blue truck, a whatever going through the quarry. Someone needs to stop them. And they will, and they're like, oh, well, I grew up around here, I used to come camping over here, I used to come hunting over here, and I just wanted to look around. And I'm like, that's awesome, but you need to stop first and get like a guide or somebody to not let you get ran over. But
I don't know if I remember my history that well, because I'm close to 80 now, but anyway, if I remember right, I remember Miss Rumbauer, who, I used to go to her house and everything, saying that some of that marble from that marble quarry was used at Jefferson City in our Capitol building.
really,
And
I've
you
heard that.
can check that and verify it, but somehow in my memory that I kind of remember that.
I also heard that.
Did you
Oh, she's
say,
scared for that.
what was the most number of people that ever married?
I never was able to find that out. But I mean, I would assume
In the hands.
quite a few, just based upon the number of businesses and everything else that had to be run with individuals. So, I mean, it was, when I say it was a town, I mean, it was a full town. There was a post office, there was even a red light district. Like, I mean, there was everything that,
A town meeting?
yeah, everything that a town
How often do you have to replace the crusher plates?
This limestone is surprisingly softer than other minerals, so several years. I think the last go around was about 5, surprisingly. If you get into anything like granite, you're talking less than a year.
Is the quality of the stone there, not to compare like a Mississippi lime, it's a different quality of stone, so it wouldn't make sense to kiln that down and refine that stone?
I'm not 100% sure,
Really?
but I don't understand which formation Mississippi lime's in, for sure, because it does dip and it does change. I'll use this, the St. Peter sandstone will actually be closer to the surface, just up in Festus. So, I mean, we're about the same distance further south. What it's doing, I'm not 100%. Now, comparing just the calcium content of the Kimmswick layer, it would be comparable to other lime-producing formations and even cement-producing formations. What it would take for us to get into that market, or if there's something else chemically not suitable for the Kimmswick, I'm not sure. And it's questions we've asked, but being that the company's focus is really on the aggregate side of things and the road building, there's just not that experience and know-how to really look into that well enough.
Adam, what other facility do you have on the location?
Well, Chara has the grinding facility. Okay. That makes the starter stone.
Under the cover.
Yeah, that's the dome where they have to keep it after they grind it down. They have to keep it dry.
And they use that for?
Putting up the smokestacks for the coal power plants.
Okay.
So,
I just want to hear you hear you say coal-powered plants.
Do you know which years the train that came from St. Louis for passengers and stopped at Brickey's when it started and when it stopped?
Yeah, the train, well, I don't know when it truly started, but the train depot was built probably about 1910, give or take, and then it was about the 1930s whenever the depot closed. Still a flag stop, and there's actually this amazing little book that was put together by locals, and it has a picture of the very last lady that was there for the flag stop hanging up the bag for the flag stop, and that closed in 1951 when they shut that down finally.
My grandfather's family was from St. Louis. They had a printing business there, and they used to ride that train from St. Louis to Brickey's. And I don't know, where, if there was a car service or if they had a car there, but they came over to, like on the weekends, they would come to their house here. That's how my grandfather met my grandmother, because she lived here, and they met at a dance hall in Bloomsdale.
I have a sweet story about my grandmother. So she would have been Mary Karen, so Theodore would have been our great-grandfather.
Okay.
And our dad absolutely loved your mother, so it's very sweet to see you. But Grandma, and now this makes sense, she was born in 1899, and she would tell the story of by herself being able to get on the train and go to St. Louis to go shopping. And she always said she was probably like between ages of 10 and 12, and that would make perfect sense. So that first stop, when it opened, that would have been when she would have been 11 years old and would go to St. Louis to shop by herself, which I think is fascinating in today's day and time, right? But then the other piece is she also said because the flour mill was there, they would get the material for the flour sacks, right? And so because they were right there, and I guess ran the general store maybe, or the flour mill, I don't have those details. I have no idea now as I'm thinking back.
Yeah, I have some of it here, there's some of it I've written down, but
And
it doesn't
some of it
all
will
come
come back
together
tomorrow.
at the same time.
But she said they could always then pick out the best material. They came in on these flour sacks and always had the best dresses because that's what the dresses then would get made from.
No wonder she always wanted the best. And the rest of the story about that grandmother was that she rode the train to St. Louis for either 1 or 2 years and went to high school at St. Elizabeth's Academy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought you did. Yeah, I think it might have only been 1 year, and I'm sure it had something to do with finances. Yeah, and so our great-grandfather ran that quarry, but as you're telling that history, it kind of helps me understand that it didn't last too long. We always thought it was a bigger piece of our history. Yeah.
Gerard's.
Okay.
Was that
Change.
I was in the
I tried to
doctor's
get him down
office,
here tonight.
so far as they did hospital group, but it's the one right behind McDonald's, that office right there. there's a picture hanging on the wall in there, just look at it today. And I kept looking at it, and I couldn't make sense out of it, because it does not look like the depot, or over here at St. John's. So the only thing, maybe what you're saying, is that picture may be a picture of Brickey.
I'll have to go take a look.
I never even thought about that until this evening.
Well, there's a lot of the small places, like, Zell and all of them had, like, little, Weingarten had a train
This one had
depot.
train tracks, it was a depot.
Oh, well,
So
I'll have to go look at that.
I looked at it, and that picture had a whole lot of people dressed up in women with, umbrellas and parasols. And
Right.
they were all standing around on that landing, and they were all dressed up in the turn of the century, 1920 suits. And so,
I have a picture where there are 3 men sitting on the railroad track down there waiting for the train, and they're all dressed in their suits and top hats and all of this, and they're sitting on the actual track waiting for the train to come. It's a cool picture.
this was some kind of special day, because it was like that, but there was 30 or 40 people all dressed up. And it was so eye-catching, because all the women were dressed up in the fineries, and the men had suits on, and man, that definitely wasn't this time period.
I was telling Sandy, I have a picture where my dad was a little boy playing ball down there, basketball, and the men and there was a couple women, but mostly men had come to watch them. And it's the dirt, they're playing on dirt, but all the men are dressed up like they were going to church, watching these kids play basketball in this dirt basketball area.
And one of your pictures up there had men sitting on the railroad.
Yes, and that picture was actually taken by Bill Nagger.
Well, this picture, I'm sure Bill Nagger's got it, because he's got pictures all over town, and this is one of them. So you probably talk to Bill, or go to the doctor's office, and look there.
I'll have to look. But I know the pictures that I got, I looked for.
I would be curious to know if that picture from Brickey, because it did not look like the same Gen depot.
I'll have to look. But no, I looked for, I think it was 8 years for pictures and history and trying to talk to everybody that I could possibly find from the area to get what I had. And then, solicited more and more started trickling in. But every single person that I found that lived in the area or grew up in the area, I just told them, oh my God, if you have any pictures that I could just scan or get a copy of or whatever like that, I would just greatly appreciate it, because you only have history for so long, and if you don't remember it, then it's gone, and history is awesome.
That would
So,
be, if it is Brickey, Andy, that picture of, that would be a good picture to have in your front office.
I'll definitely
You
look
need
at
to
it.
probably.
I'll look and I'll see if Bill has it, so I'll pay him for a copy of it.
Any more questions for our guest? Well, that was fun. I like that. You're right about the history. I mean, the towns, they come and go, the buildings, they come and go, but it's the stories and, the life of people that will live on, I think, forever. So that was neat. Appreciate it so much. Our presentation tonight brought to you by Roland Machinery, so we thank them so much for being a sponsor. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we rely on sponsorships and admissions and a grant here and there and donations to keep our doors open. So we thank you so much for supporting our museum. And come back again. If you paid for admission tonight, you're not a member, you can go downstairs to the gift shop and convert that into a membership, and you can come as many times as you want. So thank you so much, and thanks to our Brickey personnel here.
One comment I need to make, Jenny, I knew her as a baby, I babysat her.
So sweet.